Carlos, who always verbally abuses and tries to control me, was caught cheating. During a trip with his mistress, they both got into an accident. When I went to visit, Carlos blurted out an unbelievable line with a straight face. "My husband is so cold. He'll never take care of me now that I'm paralyzed from the waist down." Then Carlos, brimming with confidence, proclaimed loudly, "Don't worry, Alice. I'll have Hannah take care of both of us." "What?" Carlos turned to me, clasping his hands together. "Please take care of us." "I'm asking you to." "Let Alice decide on the interior. You just need to quietly do as we say."
"Carlos is strict with Hannah."
"She's just a housekeeper, after all." Their outrageous words ignited a deep anger within me. "Take care of you, you say? What are you even talking about? You didn't wash a single dish when I broke my arm. Why don't you ask your mistress?" I am Hannah Johnson, a 52-year-old homemaker. I live with my husband Carlos and his stepchild Percy. Carlos seemed hardworking and sincere when we dated, but after we married, he turned out to be a typical henpecked husband. I was confused, but Percy, who lost his mother at a young age, adored me like his real mother. The bond between Carlos, Percy, and me was so endearing that I couldn't break it, so I decided to wait and see, hoping that someday Carlos would change. The first time I felt something was off was 2 years after our marriage. When Percy entered 4th grade, I had more free time and thought about starting a job. Carlos, having attended a prestigious private university, planned to send Percy to prep school and tutoring since kindergarten. Many of my mom friends were considering prep schools for their kids too. Inspired by them, they began working to save for education costs, and I wanted to follow suit. Above all, staying at home, just doing housework and childcare, felt like I was cut off from society. Hey, Jane and Nancy started working part-time. Maybe I should apply too. If I work as a cashier at the supermarket, I could be home by afternoon. When I brought it up to Carlos, who had just returned from work, he inexplicably got angry. "Are you saying my salary isn't enough?" "I'm not saying that at all. You're a chief and earn a good salary for someone in your 40s, and I appreciate that. But if Percy wants to go to college, we'll need to save more." I couldn't understand why Carlos was getting angry. I tried to reason with him in a calm voice, not to be drawn into his agitation. "My salary should be enough to get by." "For now, yes, but if Percy wants to go to college far away, or live alone, we won't have enough."
"He wants to go to the same college I did."
"That's because you've talked to him a lot about it. His feelings might change when he's in 9th grade. Plus, we need to save for retirement." Carlos frowned unhappily.
"Do you, a housewife, want to live in luxury? I already let you go to the hair salon and buy clothes. You have plenty of freedom."
"With your permission every time. Yes, I want more financial freedom." Carlos looked at me suspiciously.
"Are you having an affair?"
"No, I'm not," I retorted immediately. The conversation was veering off course. "We're talking about Percy's education funds, or do you just hate the idea of me working?" I asked, puzzled, and Carlos looked displeased.
"Of course, it's like saying I can't provide for the family. People won't think well of me."
"What era are you living in? No one thinks like that anymore. I'm healthy. We don't have small children or family members needing care. I get envious hearing mom friends starting work."
"What happens in other houses is irrelevant."
Carlos raised his voice, crossed his arms, and looked down at me smirking.
"Someone as slow as you couldn't possibly do a job properly. You can't even do housework perfectly, let alone balance it with a job."
"What? If I start working, of course I'd expect you, Carlos, to share in the household chores." Carlos shouted back.
"What? I can't even relax at home. How much do you want to make me work? Are you a demon?"
"I'm trying to balance work, housekeeping, and parenting. It's hard to do it all alone. That's why I need your help, at least on weekends."
"The idea of making your husband do housework is wrong. The wife's job is to keep the house in order so the husband can focus on his work. And you can't even do that perfectly, yet you want to work? What are you thinking?"
"Fine, never mind." I got fed up and ended the conversation. There seemed to be no hope of working outside. I gave up on convincing Carlos and continued as a housewife, focusing on childcare and housework. A few years later, when I went shopping by bike to the local supermarket, I swerved to avoid a cat that darted out from a corner and crashed into a lamppost. My right arm was in severe pain, so I abandoned shopping and went to the orthopedic clinic. It was a fracture, with a recovery time of 1 month. Percy, now in 9th grade, saw my condition and looked troubled.
Wow, that looks painful. I'll help with the housework as much as I can, Mom. You shouldn't overdo it.
Thank you, that's a big help. However, Carlos's reaction was unexpected. He looked at my cast with an annoyance and blurted out,
You can still make my lunch, right?
Sorry, I can't grip a knife with my dominant hand injured. Could you buy lunch from the grocery store for a while? Breakfast will be frozen food for now. Carlos turned red with anger.
A housewife who can't clean, cook, or take care of her husband? What's the point of having you around? I hate the idea of supporting a freeloader.
But the doctor said I shouldn't move it too much. I'm sorry. Can you bear with it for just 1 month? When I acted apologetically, Carlos finally calmed his anger.
It can't be helped. Kicking out an injured person would leave a bad taste. Be thankful for my kindness in keeping a useless person like you around.
His arrogant words were frustrating, but I just smiled thinly and didn't argue. Then Carlos really just left me at home, not even bothering to wash a single dish he used. I managed to get by until the cast came off, with the help of the kind Percy. I kept quiet about my injury, even when my mother Molly called from home. I didn't want to worry her. Your aunt passed away. Come back home for a while to take care of some things. All right, but it's a 2-hour flight. I'll find some time to come back soon. I replied, and, after the cast was removed, I used visiting my mother as an excuse to return home. With college admission looming, Percy was studying hard every night at cram school and attending special lectures during holidays. I tried to support him within my capabilities, preparing stomach-friendly late-night meals and gathering information about his desired universities. One day before the holiday, Carlos came back from work and seemed unusually cheerful.
Man, I've got a business trip during the holiday. It's really busy and troublesome.
I immediately understood. It must be a trip with his mistress. For a few months, his overtime had increased suddenly. He started caring more about his appearance, and trips out of town became frequent. Recently, he even took his phone to the bathroom, which seemed odd. That's tough. Los Angeles? New Orleans?
Seattle, but it's not for sightseeing. Don't expect any souvenirs. I won't be buying anything.
Carlos becomes talkative when he lies. He never brought back souvenirs from business trips before. I almost laughed. As Carlos happily packed his brand-name suits and shirts into his suitcase, I said pointedly, You seem quite excited for a business trip.
I'm going to play golf with a client. He's a good match for me, and I'm looking forward to dinner too.
Oh, really? There was even a Seattle guidebook nearby. His blatant lies angered me, so after Carlos left, I spread out divorce papers on the dining table. Recently, while Carlos was asleep, I unlocked his phone using his fingerprint and confirmed his exchanges with his mistress. Messages like, You're the only one for me. We need to be careful not to get caught by your wife. And let's lie about a business trip and meet at a hotel were undeniable. I took photos of the messages and sent them to my phone. There was no escaping this evidence. But with limited proof and not wanting to disturb Percy before his exams, I planned to confront Carlos about divorce after gathering more evidence like photos of the two together. While cleaning, an unknown number called my mobile phone. Suspicious, I answered, and it was from the emergency center of the city hospital.
Are you Mrs. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson has been in a car accident and is seriously injured.
I held my breath in shock.
His life isn't in danger, but he needs emergency surgery. Can you come immediately?
I understand. I was surprised by how much I was shaken. Even though my love for him had faded, it seemed I still had feelings of concern for him. I quickly prepared things like change of clothes and toiletries for the hospital stay and rushed to the hospital. There, I was immediately guided to Carlos's side. Carlos was in a semi-conscious state and didn't seem to recognize me. Blood seeped through the gauze on his forehead, and one side of his face was swollen and dark red. Soon a doctor arrived and told me the shocking news.
We did a CAT scan earlier, and Mr. Johnson has damaged his spinal cord. Even with surgery, there's a high likelihood he'll be paraplegic.
What?
Please proceed with the admission formalities immediately.
Understood. As I stepped out into the hallway, a police officer was waiting. He wanted to hear about the accident, but the person who was in the car with Carlos and the person he collided with were both unable to speak. As the officer was leaving, I took a chance and asked, "What about the person who was with him?"
It was a woman in her 30s.
Ah, as I thought. Even though I expected it, I felt a slight shock. It must be his mistress. That night, Carlos underwent surgery to repair his spinal cord injury. While some functions were restored, he was left with lower body paralysis. I took care of the admission and attended the surgery, but after that, I couldn't bring myself to visit him and asked Percy to do it. However, there was a day when Percy couldn't go, so I packed Carlos's clothes in a bag and went to the hospital room. Carlos, whom I'd met for the first time in a month, seemed surprisingly cheerful. I was shocked because I thought he would be upset about being paralyzed. He had started rehabilitation and was expected to be discharged next month. That meant we needed to remodel the house. Our old house had steps and narrow corridors, making it quite inconvenient for wheelchair use. We would receive disability benefits, and Carlos could switch to remote work, so money wasn't a problem. But the thought of having to take care of Carlos in the future weighed heavily on me. With this situation, it seemed hard to bring up divorce, like abandoning an injured person. I was about to just hand over the clothes and leave when Carlos invited me to the lounge.
I'll treat you to a coffee as a thank you for coming.
No, that's okay.
Don't be shy.
I thought maybe he had gone a bit crazy from hitting his head. But when we got to the lounge, the mystery was solved. In a deserted room, a woman in a wheelchair just like Carlos was waiting for us.
Alice, it's been a day.
Carlos, I've missed you. It's hard to meet with all the tests and rehab.
Carlos's sloppy demeanor made me tighten my expression. So, this woman was his mistress. They must have had the accident while on a date. I watched them hug each other, leaning forward from their wheelchairs with a feeling of disbelief. What was Carlos thinking? Introducing me to his mistress?
Carlos is lucky to have such a kind son. He'll be in good hands after discharge.
Alice sighed.
My husband is so cold. He'll never take care of me now that I'm paralyzed from the waist down.
Then Carlos boldly proclaimed,
Don't worry, Alice. I'll have Hannah take care of both of us.
What? In front of a stunned me and Alice, Carlos turned to me, clasping his hands together.
Please, take care of us.
Oh, right. Taking care of one or two. It's all the same.
Alice, convinced, mimicked Carlos and clasped her hands together.
Please, I'm asking you to. And while you're at it, make the room cute when you remodel it for wheelchair access. I absolutely refuse to live in a room with bad taste.
Right. Hey, let Alice decide on the interior. Your taste is the worst. You just need to quietly do as we say.
Carlos is strict with you, Hannah.
Of course, she's just a housekeeper.
Their conversation ignited a fierce anger within me. Take care of you, you say? What are you even talking about? You didn't wash a single dish when I broke my arm. Why don't you ask your mistress? I coldly retorted, and Carlos and Alice stared at me in surprise.
Hey, what are you talking about? Alice can't take care of me either, since she's also paralyzed from the waist down.
Carlos frowned, and then came up with an idea.
Ah, my bad for not introducing her properly. Hannah, this is Alice Davis, wife of manager Edmund.
I know.
Nice to meet you. I'm Alice Davis.
Alice greeted me with a sweet, coquettish voice and turned to me.
Hannah, are you misunderstanding something? I was just seeking advice from Carlos.
Carlos nodded in agreement.
I'm 17 years older than Alice. It's not like she's my mistress.
Alice likes older men, right? Edmund is 3 years older than Carlos. Carlos looked surprised.
You know a lot. Well, she seems to like older men. Do I look like the type of man who would mess around with his boss's wife?
I looked at Carlos with cold eyes. No, I know exactly what kind of person you are. Unaware of my disdain, Carlos passionately spun his big lie.
See, when Edmund invited me to go golf, I visited their house. Since then, I've been giving Alice advice occasionally.
That's right. Carlos is so reliable. I end up talking to him about all sorts of troubles with my mom friends. Oh, Hannah, are you jealous? I'm sorry.
Alice smirked slyly. Interesting. In our 10 years of marriage, whenever I complained to you, I got yelled at, and when I sought advice, you belittled me.
That's because your problems were too trivial. I thought they weren't worth my attention.
Carlos muttered his excuse.
This time, we just happened to meet on the street. We had time before her train, so we were moving in the car to find a place to talk comfortably. Then, unfortunately, we got involved in the accident. It was a disaster for us, wasn't it?
I was amazed at how effortlessly such lies came to him. However, Alice went along with it, smiling.
Right, we were just going to have coffee and talk, and then we got into an accident. But if you're going to take care of us, I feel relieved.
Alice gave me a flattering look. Don't make decisions on your own. I never said I would take care of you. I stated this clearly, and Alice responded with a mocking laugh in a low voice.
But Hannah, you're taking care of Carlos's son, right? If you can care for a child not related by blood, surely you'd be happy to care for me, the wife of a manager.
Exactly, Hannah. For the past 10 years, I've been supporting you. So as a way of repaying me, you should take care of me and, of course, Alice.
Their nonsensical reasoning left me speechless. So you're going to stick with the just a confidant story? Don't be ridiculous. Even middle schoolers can come up with better excuses. I glared at them and spat out. Why don't you just admit it? I was having an affair.
What affair? Where's your proof?
Carlos raised his voice in an uncharacteristically high pitch, clearly flustered.
That's right. If you suspect something between us, then show some evidence.
When I confronted them with the vivid exchanges and photos of Carlos and Alice in bed saved on my mobile phone, Carlos turned pale.
How dare you look through my phone? There are things that are acceptable and not acceptable even between spouses.
I don't need to be lectured by someone who cheats. As a father, having an affair with your boss's wife while your son is working hard studying for exams is despicable.
Shut up. You're not even related by blood. Don't act like his mother.
Carlos's words hurt me. True, no matter how much I loved Percy as my own son, I couldn't compete with his blood-related father, Carlos. One of my fears in not divorcing sooner was the worry that young Percy might choose Carlos over me. As I bit my lip, a loud noise echoed in the quiet hallway. A nurse was pushing a bed towards us. The nurse entered the room and stopped the bed next to me. Glancing at the person lying there, I screamed in shock. Edmund?
What, Edmund?
Carlos also exclaimed in surprise, moving his wheelchair towards us. Mr. Davis, I'll come pick you up in 30 minutes.
Understood, thank you.
The nurse bowed to us and left the lounge, and Edmund used the bed's reclining feature to sit up. What a surprise! I heard you were discharged, so I didn't expect to see you here at this time.
Sorry to startle you.
Edmund laughed, shaking his shoulders.
I told Alice, but I made it clear not to tell Carlos. I didn't want him to run away.
Edmund, you were diagnosed with full-body contusions, right? Did you find anything wrong after that?
Yeah, I felt worse last night, so I was admitted again for a precautionary CT and MRI. Huh? Edmund, you were injured too?
Carlos looked puzzled, was met with an awkward expression from Alice. Wait, Carlos didn't know about Alice? I wondered. I had heard from the police officer on the day of the accident. Carlos's severe injury was caused by crashing into a car at a red light at high speed. And the person he hit was Edmund himself, who had contacted me. The person Carlos hit was Edmund, and the woman in Carlos's passenger seat was Edmund's wife. From Alice's reaction, it seemed that Edmund had been visiting her, and Alice had been instructed by Edmund to keep silent about the fact that their opponent was Edmund, and that he would be coming to talk to Carlos in the lounge tonight.
The car you hit at 150 kilometers per hour was mine. You were unconscious, so you didn't realize it. What?
I was conscious, so I knew.
Alice said sourly, and Carlos's eyes widened in shock.
Then why didn't you tell me?
I did when the accident happened. I said it was my husband's car.
Not that. We dated here the day before yesterday. You should have told me then.
If I had told you, my husband said he would demand a $50,000 affair compensation from you.
Alice shouted. Just a minute ago, she was cute, but now she screamed with a demonic expression.
You were just a fling. I never intended to divorce my husband. But because of the accident, he found out, and now my body is like this. I'm still young, and my life is a mess. Divorce confirmed. It's all your fault. How are you going to take responsibility?
Alice.
Carlos looked at her with a frightened gaze.
Sorry, it's my fault. So I won't claim compensation for divorcing Alice, but of course I will from you. $50,000. Pay up.
Edmund spread a wicked smile across his face.
And Carlos, your insurance had expired, right? You're going to compensate for our medical bills and the $200,000 BMW you destroyed, right?
Of course you'll pay, right? I asked you to drive slowly, but you had to show off in speed, idiot.
Alice attacked Carlos with a harsh tone.
And let me add, your endless bragging about your son is annoying.
Alice contorted her face.
Talking about how he has the same elite potential as you, and how he'll succeed in middle school exams and go to a state university, it's all trivial. You're a chief, but you're stingy with gifts, choose second-rate hotels and third-rate restaurants. I wondered what kind of woman would be married to someone like you. And it turns out she's not much either.
What did you say? I don't want to be lectured by a woman who had an affair with this man. I immediately retorted. He's just proud and drunk on the idea of being desirable to a manager's wife. Any young and pretty woman would have done for him. That's why he drove recklessly to show off. Carlos, apparently guilty, looked down. If I mattered to you, you would have driven carefully. And now you want me to take care of your mistress too? That's a bad joke.
Shut up.
Carlos snapped at me and then hesitantly spoke to Alice.
Alice, you're getting divorced from Edmund, right? So there's no problem with you marrying me.
He stubbornly persisted even in this situation.
No way. I've already told you.
Alice firmly refused.
I'll just rent an apartment after I'm discharged and live alone with the help of a home caregiver. I never want to see your face again, after putting me in this situation.
She then pointed her finger at me and mocked.
This man, after all his verbal abuse, still expects you to take care of him. How much has he belittled you? It's pathetic.
Alice, stop it.
Goodbye. Don't contact me anymore.
After saying her piece, Alice skillfully wheeled herself back to her room.
Carlos, you're paying the compensation and medical bills, plus the car damages. You'll get the bill after discharge.
As the conversation ended, a nurse waiting outside the lounge came in. As Edmund's bed was pushed by the nurse around the corner of the hallway, Carlos, who had been watching, exploded in red-faced anger.
Damn it, that woman, pretending to be in love with me, changes her attitude as soon as I become paraplegic.
He came over in his wheelchair and clung to my arm.
You'll take care of me, right? You're my wife, after all.
I refuse. I pulled out the divorce papers and a pen from my bag and slammed them on the table. I thought I'd endure until the exams were over, but I've reached my limit. Sign these now. Carlos's eyes widened. Then he said desperately,
You're really going to divorce me? After I've taken care of you for these 10 years? This is how you repay me?
Who took care of whom? I countered Carlos. Do you remember what you said when I broke my arm? If you can't even take care of your husband, there's no point in you being here. I hate the idea of supporting a freeloader. Be grateful for my kindness in keeping you around. Even thinking about it now, those were horrible words. I let out all my pent-up frustration. You didn't even wash one plate you used, and now you want me to take care of you because you're paraplegic? Don't joke with me. Carlos grimaced.
Your injury was your own carelessness. I don't have to cover for you.
Well then, since your injury was also due to your carelessness, I don't have to take care of you either.
Fine, I get it. I'll sign.
Carlos signed the divorce papers in resignation.
Don't come crying to me for a remarriage later.
Yeah. Percy, what's wrong? Visiting hours are almost over. I was puzzled as Percy rushed into the lounge. Without answering, Percy ran to Carlos and raised his voice, which was unusual for him.
Dad, the college entrance funds are gone. Do you know anything about it? Yeah, I used them.
I was speechless at Carlos's nonchalant admission. Percy's gentle face turned into one of anger.
Are you serious? It's crazy to take money from someone else's savings.
Did you spend it on your mistress? I asked incredulously, and Carlos admitted it easily.
Yeah, what's wrong with a parent using their child's money?
Both Percy and I stared at Carlos in disbelief. Do you realize what you've done?
I can do whatever I want. I'm the father.
Carlos smirked, and I felt disgusted.
How are you going to live without me? Do you think any company will hire a 52-year-old housewife?
Wait, Dad, didn't you know? Percy said with a hint of disbelief.
Mom inherited $1 million from the aunt who passed away recently. Huh? What?
Percy, it's too early to tell. I said with a laugh. Well, that's the situation. Oh, but I'll still claim the compensation, so make sure you pay it.
Fine. Percy, I'm counting on you when I get discharged.
Carlos, trying to hide his shock, smiled at Percy.
Even if we're divorced, the bond between parent and child remains. You'll take care of me for the rest of my life. No way. You used up my money and still ask for my help? What kind of nerve do you have?
Percy smiled coldly.
Besides, I'm going to a university far away. What? You're supposed to go to my alma mater. I changed my course a long time ago. I tried to tell you, but you were too busy to listen.
No, Percy. He was too busy flirting with his mistress.
Right. In the end, the family didn't matter to him. That's not true,
Carlos exclaimed in panic.
I've always cared for you guys. Sure, I had an affair and spent the savings on that woman. But you're the most important to me. I've worked hard and given all my salary to Hannah. That's expected. Nothing to brag about,
Percy stated firmly.
I've always hated how you treated Mom harshly since I was a kid. Really? I didn't know. Of course. I prefer my parents to get along. In my friends' houses, everyone does dishes and cooking, but at home, you'd boast. Mom loved me. It was not even her blood, and I loved her back. Why did you treat her so badly, Dad? Didn't you marry her because you loved her?
Percy.
I saved most of my part-time earnings, and you just used them up. And now asked to be taken care of? You've always been cold to Mom, too. It's unbelievable. Percy, did you really think that about me?
Carlos looked shaken.
Weren't we always close, you and I? You like me more than a mother who's not even blood related, right? Even if we are blood related, I don't need a father like you. Mom's enough. I know it's tough with your condition, but I don't want anything to do with you anymore. You'll have to manage on your own.
That's right. You lack too much awareness as a parent. It's sad to be disowned by your own son. Leaving a stunned Carlos in the lounge, Percy and I headed home together. Carlos, who had frivolously cheated with his boss's wife, was now divorced by me, abandoned by Percy, and left utterly alone. Additionally, he was burdened with a vast debt of paying Edmund's compensation, medical bills, the cost of the BMW, and reimbursing Percy's college fund. After his discharge, Carlos, overwhelmed by his debts, went to Edmund's house to apologize and beg to keep his job. Thanks to Edmund's leniency, Carlos wasn't demoted and resumed work remotely, but the rumor of his affair with Edmund's wife spread quickly. He was gossiped about whenever he went to the office and eventually found it unbearable, leading to his resignation. Carlos, having lost his job, asked his relatives for money. Initially, they sympathized with him, but after learning he had spent Percy's college preparation funds, they criticized him. Eventually, Carlos's brother-in-law, known for his strictness, took him in, intending to re-educate him. Alice divorced and kicked out of her home, rented an apartment from a relative, and started living alone. She reluctantly began working on a computer, relying on home caregivers during the day. However, due to her difficult personality, she constantly quarreled with them. Eventually, only the harsh and blunt caregivers would come, and Alice reportedly spends her days being scolded and crying. I, finally free from Carlos, used the inheritance from my aunt and the compensation from Alice to fund Percy's college. With the remaining money, I bought a condominium and am enjoying life alone. Without anyone to complain about my housekeeping or worry about others' opinions, I've also resumed part-time work after 10 years. My days are busy but fulfilling. Recently, Carlos sent me an incredulous message.
Hey, you must be lonely without me, right? Should I come to see you? I've taken care of you all these years. You owe me gratitude money.
I refused his persistent requests, but he must have asked Percy for my address, as he eventually showed up in a taxi outside my condominium, loitering around. I called the police and he was arrested. In the end, it was just a filing of charges, but it turned out he had been loitering around Alice's apartment too. The brother-in-law, furious when he came to pick up Carlos from the police station, placed Carlos under house arrest. Carlos now spends his days working on a computer from early morning to late at night, tirelessly repaying his debts. Percy, taking his father as an example of what not to be, is diligently studying and enjoying his university life. Though not related by blood, Percy is like a son to me. I look forward to warmly watching his continued growth.